Guess we'll give everyone another minute or two.
Maybe this is me being too much of an authoritarian. I always start exactly on the top of the hour. For
Oh yeah.
one, also am respect tone. So out of respect of those who did show up on time, but also a little bit of my stickler authoritarianism, perhaps.
I guess it's my emotional triple split nature where I'm like, time, just a
Time is an
construct.
abstract concept. Well, you also pointed out in my body graph the other day the potential for details to get mired in the details, that I can get so
Yeah.
hung up on being so specific, overly precise, overly detailed, and that can really be a
Yep.
point of difficulty for me. So
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, we can get started. This is just an opportunity to ask questions about what's coming up for you in your experiment. I'd rather, field questions that are experiential, something you're actually grappling with, as opposed to just a theoretical curiosity. Nangshi has a good question. Would you share about your 4629's experience when it's connected to the solar plexus via the 59.6? How is your serendipity and experience different from Jonah's? Well, wow, that's a great question. Um, well, my serendipities have a lot to do with intimate encounters, right? Intimate encounters. I would also say that with my inner authority, I feel a pull at the G center, top of the chest, in addition to where I locate my physical solar plexus. Like, the emotional wave is in the physical solar plexus up to like the mid chest. And this is the G, right? And that's why when you talk to self-projected projectors, they're often tuning into something right there at the top of their chest. So I feel a pull in that physical location, and it's serendipity with people and being in the right place, right time for co-creating with people, as I am with Jonah in recent history. And I would also say that my intimate connections, right? When intimate doesn't necessarily mean sexual, but the people that I'm close with really determine where I'm at, my place, right? So that's a few things off the top of my head. It also means I have an intimate identity, right? I have a creative identity. All the themes of that 59.6 flavor my G. It's interesting having the 4629. I'd love to hear from Jonah, but I have the experience of, if I know one person in a foreign city and I go there, I will run into that one person. Always happens.
yeah, and also just that you kind of have this ability. I guess in your case, it's on the design side, so it might not be. For me, it's fully personality side. But I sometimes completely lose track of time, and I'm so in the flow that everything is dovetailing and magical, and then I'm like, where did that time go? Other times, I'm checking my phone, I'm checking my watch, and I really kind of have the sense that I'm just not in the flow of life. And usually it's because I didn't actually have a sacral response to doing that. I just sort of said, oh, yeah, okay, sure, we'll do this. And then I'm kind of like, I get this trapped feeling of not being able to get out of there. So, yeah, I also noticed that your G center only has one gate activation, which is that 46, and
Mm-hmm.
it's unconscious. And in my case, my personality sun is gate 46, and my personality earth is gate 25. I also have gate 2, the moon actually in gate 2 for me. So I have more activations, and 2 and 25 add their own qualities, where, right, my serendipity is related to my sort of, even though I am a desire person like Ra, I have a mechanical innocence of the gate 25. And then I also have gate 2, which requires a certain receptivity to life, being an eternal student, always learning, and so on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm always filtering for who can I be close with, right? What can we co-create? What can I commit to, that I love doing in and of itself, right? With another person or people, right? And then in that, if I've entered into it correctly, then, we can discover something together, and succeed where others fail. I definitely relate to the succeed where others fail or fail where others succeed theme. There's a lot of things I've been able to pull off that are extraordinary. And then there's simple things that I've completely botched. Oh. And I have to be careful about expectations, right? With my intimate exchanges, right? Expectations are always the temptation with abstract circuitry, right? Where is it all going? What am I going to get out of this? It's really about just being in it fully for its own sake, right? Other questions about parts of your design or parts of your, aspects of your experiment, anything that you're struggling with?
Yeah, I'd love your perspective. Do I need to put my birth data in here or just
Yeah,
tell you?
let's do that.
Okay.
Is it 2 ends? Okay.
Yeah. And last name's Lee, Lea.
Mm-hmm.
9/21/73,
Okay.
1:31 a.m.
Oops.
US. And it's Escondido, California.
How do you spell it?
ESCON
ESCON.
CIDO.
Got it.
Yep. So I'm in Chiron right now. And as Richard explained to me, over the next couple of years, it gets to go retrograde back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So lots of fun there in the 51. So just love. I've been asking different people their perspective on this and what you see and your thoughts.
On your Chiron experience?
Yeah, like with the 51, it sounds like it's going to be fun. That's how I'm taking it.
Well, my Uranus opposition has the 51, which I don't otherwise have, and it's certainly been shocking.
Yeah.
Yeah, the 51's no joke, especially with Uranus. It's definitely going to be a curveball, right? But yeah, let's see. So when did you officially cross over? Let's see.
June 21 was
June
my
21, yep. Yeah. Well, it's going to be a time where you're going to be letting go of something, right? Something that no longer serves you. And, just thinking of the third line profile that you're in, the key there, the third line wants to sustain, right? So the key is space, right? And you're probably going to be challenged in terms of your pride or in terms of shame. These are the things that really drive third line breaking of the bond.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a time when shame and or pride, power dynamics are going to arise, and it's your capacity to be centered through that, right? Which will let you take the space that you need without, burning bridges.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
That sounds a lot like how my Uranus opposition was.
Yeah.
Which
Were
was
you also,
not. Which
were
was
you
not.
also in a third line Uranus opposition?
I was 2/4.
Mm.
Yeah.
It's interesting to go through these cycles with human design. I mean, when I got into human design, I was 33, so I was already on the other side of my Saturn return. And so I'm going through my Uranus opposition now, and it's interesting to go through with your eyes wide open about it. And like just watching the things that come out of my mouth, because I'm in a 4-6 cycle right now. And I said something like, I really want to make sure my next relationship, we got a strong friend foundation and they're going to be a soulmate. I'm like, you just can't make this stuff up, right?
No, I know. It's a thing. I started design when I was just on the other side of my Uranus. I was still in that 7-year cycle, but it was a thing. And the awareness that I've been able, it feels like it hasn't quit. Like these last 6 years have not stopped from one cycle to the next. It's just been boom, 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 with one experience after the other of shifts and changes. So it's fascinating. So yeah, I'm just really curious. I've been asking anyone who would look at it, what their thoughts were with this Chiron.
And the other thing is, so, it's a time of transcending the small ego, right? The smaller self.
Yeah.
Right.
And
go ahead.
No, I think you're right. And that's something that what I've been noticing with people with Chiron is that gate is actually something that's played out their whole life, whether they have it or not. In the people I've talked to. And so for me, that has been my lifelong thing of with that open ego center, completely open. It has been my challenge, and being strong enough in who I am and being able to stand up, and balancing whatever ego is there to find that harmony. And so this Uranus put me through that. And then now Chiron, I'm like, okay, like that ego is this over here, it's not me. And so there's this beautiful release that has happened over the last 4 or 5 years because of that. I love that you said that, because that's how I feel my life has been leading up to this experience of like that that little ego.
And you can be egoless, right? Now technically we should make a distinction, because the ego, in terms of how we usually think of that from a spiritual context, is not equivalent to obviously the ego center. Right. But what I would say is that the ego center is an energy that can back up the false self, right? And so you're not as good at backing up that false self.
Right.
Yeah. And that false self would be a mixture of personality distortion in the open centers, right? And but it's like a reflector center, I say, in kind of a loose way, with that completely open ego, the conditioning doesn't have to stick. It doesn't have to really sink deep into you, right? You can kind of shake it off. You can be more objective to egoic themes.
Yeah, I agree.
It's a great continuity with your innocence motivation.
Yeah, right? It is.
Yeah. And 6-line personality.
I have a couple comments I'd like to share. First of all, just how interesting it is that we see the Chiron return having the personality Sun Earth 15-3, and then we see in her natal chart the design Sun Earth and right. I mean, it's like that's already that's not common. That's not something that's assured or guaranteed. And then we also see on the natal personality nodes are also 10 and 15. And just a couple comments, I guess, on the undefined ego. Yeah, I completely agree about, and I guess I would just add to whether there is a hanging gate or not, the open centers and the undefined centers are really there for us to participate with our awareness, and that is how we develop the wisdom. And so it's requiring a certain level of participation. Someone with a defined ego doesn't necessarily have awareness of their defined ego. That undefined ego is going to be bringing you to an awareness of what you value, what's worth valuing, and so on. I don't typically look at the gates as much in a Chiron or a Uranus, any of the life cycles. I actually think it's very difficult to interpret. So that design Saturn in gate 51, line 3, I do not see as simple as highlighting the ego as a life theme. In fact, maybe there's some interpretive value there, but what I actually look at, the fundamentals are the nodes of the return, both the gates, but even more so the lines, even more fundamentally the lines. Like going into a third line node phase can be a phase of having to make a lot of money and having a lot of financial challenges, having a very difficult road ahead. Going into a first line nodal phase can be that environment will be very educational for you and will be about foundations and fundamentals surrounded by students, things like that, but also survival needs. But then when I look at after the nodes, I typically look at the incarnation cross and profile. That is the sun earth of the return. There we see it's the vessel of love and it's 4 gates of the G center. So I absolutely see what you were saying, James, about this being a time of going into that engagement with the higher self and overcoming some of the ego things just from that regard. And just generally speaking, that your purpose will be augmented by this 3-5. We can look at Ra's example of his Chiron, where he was a 2-4 contagion, and how his second line made him cut out access to himself, but from 90% of people, stop touring, right? He went to the second line theme of putting up barriers, then his fourth line theme of spreading the contagion of human design that caught on like wildfire during that time. So just asking what is this right angle cross of the vessel of love and how it augments your left angle. Is it the left angle of the plane? Which
Yes.
one? Yeah. So the plane, I see the left angle of cross of the plane as being so immersed in the mundane and really seeing with eyes wide open, having left behind Eden and left behind the, vessel of love. It's kind of, or I guess going into the vessel of love, however you want to look at it. But having left behind Eden, so many Cross of Eden people are stuck and looking for their Eden, and the plane is here to kind of see them all broken down on the side of the road, having failed in their dreams, and really seeing the earth as it is, and then asking, can I still love this? Can I love the plane in all of its messiness? And so it is interesting that now this vessel of love is augmenting that and bringing that extra focus on the G center.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. I'd like to add that my whole life has always been full of challenges and struggle and suffering because of whatever. And I've always just loved the experience. Like, could this get worse? Yeah. Could it get better? Yeah, but it's kind of cool. We're living in a car right now and we're having fun. Okay, we don't have electricity for the weekend. My childhood was a mess. So and as I've gotten older and now I'm going through this Chiron, it's funny because the rough moments are just even more opportunity for embracing that and just being like, okay, how do I envelop other people into this feeling? How can I pull it in so that it's not a negative experience? It's a beautiful experience. And so that's been how I'm interpreting this right now, because that's what that's what I'm living. Yeah. So I appreciate sharing that.
I agree with Jonah's emphasis on those particular elements. I would say that also having crossed into Uranus opposition with my former partner, she went through some really wild experiences, and we could really map everything to the line level keynotes. Like one was, I think she has 55 line 6, and it was something along the lines of, look, you're innocent. You were just following marching orders. And she was in a weird predicament where she was kind of gotten some hot water and a reputation, her reputation suffered, but ultimately she was innocent and just following orders. So you can dig in at that level and find a lot of interesting stuff.
Cool.
Yeah.
It's fun stuff. Thank you.
You're welcome. Someone here, Marissa said, I have a question, something to look at. Okay.
Hey there.
Have you in here?
I probably not.
Okay.
10:15 October 15th, 1983.
Okay.
1957. US. Sacramento, California. Okay, so my question, I've been pondering this for a while, and it's kind of a general question, but also relates to my chart, relates to my husband's chart as well. I have a pretty even smattering of lines in my design. I have like 6 first lines, 5 second lines, 5 third lines, 4 lines, 5 lines, and then I only have 1 6th line. Now I know there's like a lot of, I'm not saying, well, I shouldn't say a lot. There is some info out there how having no lines of, or nothing of a certain line might be experienced. But I was wondering if you have seen much in relation to having just one single line. Like I only have 1 6th line in Uranus there, my design Uranus. It's in detriment because of Jupiter. And I highly relate to that detriment. I see it all the time, and it's definitely something very anxious about often. And my husband, he only has 1 2nd line, and he's a 4 6, and I feel like there's some like struggle there between us, like misunderstanding or not being able to like really relate to each other because of this. But I was just wondering in general if there's anything you've seen or what you might say about only having 1 line of one of the 1 line. That
Yeah.
makes sense.
I don't always agree with some of the conclusions. Like I know there's like some things people have been passing around about what it means to not have certain lines. I mean, I would say with your husband, he's not very transparent, right? Second lines are like, you can see into them, right? So even though I'm a 5th line personality and I have 8 5th lines, as a matter of fact, I'm a 59-2 and I'm a 6-2 and I have 6 second lines. So there are these ways that people can see into me. I remember that Ross said that third lines, are without any third lines, you wouldn't be able to like handle the future. And I think he's sort of saying you're non-adaptive.
Mm-hmm.
A 6th line, I only have 2. You're not a role model, obviously.
Right.
So all of those 6th line qualities are, not really a part of you. Yeah, I don't know what else I would extrapolate from that.
There is also like my husband's 1 2nd line. It's in the 57. In the 57, he has it in defined center. So I also wonder, is there a difference perhaps with
Totally.
it being
Yeah.
defined center?
He's projecting out that he's intuitive, right? So people read him as intuitive, whether he is or he isn't. But yeah, absolutely. Whether it's defined or undefined does matter as well.
On the 6th line level, would there be like, I don't want to say anything to look out for, but like what would be, I know SNA, right? Appropriate, but in terms of like how to handle, like I do, like this is about like biting off more than you can chew and stuff like that. Is this something that like to expect also that maybe later on I'll get solved, or like not solved, but kind of reach some point of like acceptance, I guess, in just like any other, 6th line process or cycle.
Are you asking if that particular 6th line has its cycle, like has a 3-part life process?
Yeah, or just like what to expect from like only having one in general with that cycle process. Like I'm aware of it in terms of like I noticed that I've struggled with this a lot. I mean, obviously I have an undefined sacral too, so that's really, is it just about me coming into my power later on, perhaps, and being able to make?
Yeah. So, right. So the first thing I want to look at, well, there's a couple of things. So gate 34, right, is power. Power to what? Power to survive, right, as yourself, right, because it's looking at integration. I don't know, whoops, I don't know what 34 is looking at next in the wheel here. Let's see.
A 9,
Is it looking at, yeah.
which I have on my personality side.
Right. So you're looking at gate 9, line 1 with that. So I don't know the, obviously that's details, the taming power of the small. What's interesting is we had a nodal environment. I believe when COVID happened, we were in a 52-58, which is my personality, sun and earth, and we were looking at the taming power of the small. I mean, how ironic is that, right? With a virus that shuts down the world. But yeah, so
yeah,
you're looking at, the details and so on. But yeah, you have a, your 50-year life process of, developing wisdom around the correct use of power. So, 34 can definitely get it wrong, right? That first line's the bully. I don't remember all the lines, but the third line's machismo. So it can err on this indiscriminate display of power when it feels its survival is threatened.
right.
Right. In the sixth line, I believe the keynote here is something like the correct use of power, knowing when enough is enough. Yeah, enthusiasm overriding better judgment invariably leads to complications, the lack of restrictions that can sap one's strength. Yeah. And, detriments aren't bad. They're where we stub our toe to gain awareness.
Right.
Probably stubbed that toe before. And
many times on that one, for sure.
Mhm.
And then I have Jupiter there in the second line too. So it's kind of like,
Yeah,
there's parts of it that's hard to see. And then,
right.
hard for me to.
And just remember, this is in resonance with the machismo, right? So at some point, in the not self, if you go into policing mode, right? There could be an indiscriminate display of power when you feel like, your survival or your personal empowerment is threatened. So there is that resonance. There is that, yeah, that challenge.
Cool.
Yeah. A lot of questions in the chat here. Yeah, you're welcome. Jonah said people with a lot of 6 lines could be said to be late bloomers, as it takes a long time for those 6 lines to unfold. Same for people who have a lot of blue lines. Blue? Yes, the blue lines in the Rei Ching. Oh, right. The overarching line that takes a lifetime to fully mature into. You're also a late bloomer if you're a triple split, I would say. That's been my experience. And I see that with my triple split clients, or quad splits, because you're just cycling through. You're not always living in one of those elements. You're more identified with one at a time, right? So they don't all mature evenly or at the same pace.
I would agree with that. My mom's a triple split.
Yeah. It's a hell of a thing to be a triple split.
And she's a 3-5 too. So
cool. Other questions? If I missed anything in the chat here.
Nancy had a question about the solar return and asked, would you pay more attention to the planet and line value there? I know you said, James, that you pay attention to the planet and line value for all returns.
Major cycles. Yeah.
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 I tend to look at them more for the solar return, but I mean, I'm not opposed to looking at that for something like the Saturn cycle or Uranus opposition. It's just not as simple to deconstruct that, but especially if you're into that cycle 3 or 4 or 7 years, it might be easier to see how that story plays out.
Yeah. I mean, I was in a situation in which, my partner was going through a hell of a lot, and it just, it seemed worthwhile to kind of investigate, you know, and she was 2 to 3 years into her Uranus. And then, yeah, we could find a lot of those things.
So I'd love for others to ask their questions, but in lieu of that, or in the moment while people are coming up with questions or looking at their charts, I'll just say something that I've been thinking about over the last month or so has been developing an understanding of the nodes. And I know that last session we looked at the link nodes, so I don't want to do that again per se, but looking at the lines of the nodes, this kind of came up when we looked at the global cycles, just how we deconstruct the lines there, and then also just how multivalent the nodes really are, how they are activations for us, but they are also indications of our environment and our view. And
Yeah.
I know that you've also made extensive use of view in your analysis, which is something that on the personality side, I've tended to focus more on motivation, but you've really,
Yeah. Well, that's a
really
good
good
jumping
use of
off
view.
point, Jonah. So there's a reason why I emphasize view. Anyone want to take a guess why this design would emphasize view?
First color in your first line. No, I don't know. 49.3.
Anyone else?
Sustainability.
Sorry?
Go ahead. Well, I was gonna say, you're looking at whether this is gonna be survivable. Is it sustainable? How is this foundation gonna be? Yeah, the fears.
Yeah, that's one reason. Yep, that's one totally valid reason, right? Also, my top open center is what's called prime, right? When your top open center is an awareness center, then you have a prime issue. And a prime issue, among other things, is nodal, right? And it means that my mind is very concerned about where am I going? How am I going to get there? Am I doing the right things to get there? Right? So that's another factor. There's one really big one in addition to those.
A lot of resonance on the personality side.
Yep. That's a hell of a lot of resonance to my view. Right? So, you know, my mentor Kamud would say, you know the price of meat. You're paying attention to the world very, very closely. And that's not exactly how it manifests. It's more like I have a lot of observational power and ability to track what's really going on in a given situation. Right. And I'm filtering it through the lens of, is this going to work? Are we on solid ground? Right? Is this secure? You know? So my mind, you know, one of the things about color resonance, if you don't have color resonance, this is the only gate I don't have color resonance with. It means that your experiences of that gate, regardless of whether they're in an undefined or defined center, aren't tracking to the conceptual mind. Right? So color resonance also really indicates how much you're learning from your experience. Right? It's another level of the chart. I mean, color resonance is definition in the substructure.
I'm sorry, can you just real quick teach us how to identify color resonance?
Sure. Yeah. So you would look at either of these colors, right? Motivation or view. And then I'm looking for, with this, I'm looking for 5s and 2s. Right. And with this, I'm looking for 1s and 4s. All right. Which is all the rest of them. So my mind skews much more towards what's really happening. Right. What's really happening? Are we really on solid ground? You know, I mean, if that's your question, then I'm a great person to consult, you know, because it's very unusual to have 6 gates resonating with your view.
Well, and I love this this thing you've also told me before, which is like the definite, it's the same as or similar to definition at the substructure. Color resonance is kind of like having channels connecting those gates. And not having resonance is kind of like a lot of lack of definition at the substructure level. Now, obviously, that is a simile. We're not going to take that literally because definition is something that occurs between two centers, the definition of those centers by a channel. But I love what you're saying is that just as definition at the surface level makes someone fixed and makes a connection between these two different activations, color resonance is the equivalent at the substructure. And I thought that was really profound.
It's consistency, right? So I don't think John Cole will mind this very simple. Let's see here. So he told me that when he was in whichever class with Andrea Rakel Wolf, she said, you know, your mind isn't as inconsistent as you think. Right? Your mind isn't as inconsistent as you think. See, it's quite a lot. So what this person's going to experience is consistent themes, right? Around the hope, guilt dynamic, as well as the survival wanting dynamic, you know? And let's see here. So he's got like an pretty equal distribution there.
Well, and he's got that connection, that communication between the color one and his node to his moon. And without that resonance there, then you end up with that broken communication in a sense.
Well,
And
that's
so,
an interesting question. So Kamud asked Ra about that. If you don't have color resonance here, is there some sort of a breakdown? And he said, no, they're the nodes of the moon. So there's always a relationship here.
well, that's really interesting. That's not what they're teaching in IHDS. That's not what Andre is teaching. Or a lock. So I'd be really curious. I'll go look in the manuals and see, but I've heard, and I've talked to her about that. I've heard that before. So
she's saying there's a breakdown here because of that.
yes, no, for him it would be no breakdown because both colors resonate.
But she's saying,
yeah. If the color was 3 and his moon was 1, then there would be a breakdown of communication.
Well, like in your case, James, but I think the real question is not whether it really is a breakdown or really isn't a breakdown, but what we mean by breakdown, because so much of language is speaking at a certain level in a certain context. So it may be that Ra was saying you will always have a focus that affects you and that relates to what you see because the moon is related to the nodes fundamentally. But at a different level, what James was saying about how you can sort of deconstruct that if there is no color resonance, you might not learn from that. It may be that what James is witnessing in his life has nothing to do with the moon's drive to focus in a certain area.
Could be. And I know when Andrea was talking about it, because this was something we really poked at her about because it was a bit confusing. A lot of it had to do with communication more than anything. So I could find the audio and share with you guys if you would like. Take me a bit to find it, but I have the recording on the class. So it was a really interesting class. But
yeah, I would like to hear that.
Yeah, I'll find it and get it to you.
I mean, what's interesting is that I do have the experience, despite the lack of resonance here, of, because this is the organizational principle of the mind, right? Everything flows like that, right? Then it flows here and then up here, right? So I do have this sense of like, am I in a situation that is artificially limited or not, right? Like I do have this sense of filtering for how my life is limited, and I'm certainly looking for that 3 on the other side, you know, and oh, things are so difficult to start, and you know, I'm looking for innovation. I'm looking to transcend the limitations. So it is going on in my mind. You know, that's definitely trackable. Well, we definitely got in the weeds on that one. Any other questions about color resonance? Very interesting topic.
Hey,
You know,
James, I do, James.
yeah.
What if but I like where you're going with that. But now what about if the line is in dissonance? Then you're not going to look at the harmony and the color, right?
If the line is in dissonance, so okay, so let's look at an example. So you're saying, what would it be? So here we have one, and where's an example of that?
Well, like your two, I'm sorry, I was looking at the line. If you're looking at the line first, which is going to, you know, whether it's in harmony or resonance or dissonance, you're not going to, if it's in dissonance in the line, then it's not going to matter if it's in harmony in the color.
That's not true. So yeah, so
pick one there. So 3, are we going to use line 3? So the 3 there and maybe the 2 in your gate 6. There you have dissonance at the line level and harmony at the color.
yeah,
I'm curious what you would say about it.
these are definitely linked. Yeah, these are definitely linked. So another thing that Ross said is that there is harmony and dissonance even at the tonal level, which I distinctly remember when he said that, the whole class groaned, like, oh shit, a whole other layer to think about this. But he said the strongest link is color. The strongest link is color. So there's not a breakdown because there's a 3 and a 2 here. Like these are definitely connected. And this is significant, obviously, right? Because this is the crux of my differentiated self. I'm here to learn through conflict and interpersonal dynamics and so on. And
Yeah,
that is
and
track.
also just one minor point, and this might be kind of a technical point, but color as the exit frequency of the crystal only really exists in the sun, earth, and all the other colors are already resonant in some sense. So it's kind of like synthetic color almost. That's something that isn't so necessary to know or understand, but it's just something that Ra points out and kind of explains why color resonance may be primary over, for instance, line resonance, because the line is a specific quality of activation, but its color is so much more related to the idea of resonance itself. It's almost like line harmony is borrowed from color in that sense, rather than being primary. That color is a more fundamental aspect. So it's just kind of an interesting point. He goes into it in personality and design resonance mapping. And it's a very subtle point, but I guess it's just the idea that that color is something that does have primacy in the analysis of the planetary harmonies. And that's also kind of the closest thing to aspects that we have in human design, would be color resonance in some sense.
Yeah, I mean, I would say color resonance is where you really start to crack into a much deeper story. For example, looking at this chart, right, we know that Kimberly is really thinking about these gates, right? She's really thinking about gate 5, right? But there's another not self theme that is equally strong with her that is actually in her definition. How can that be? And she would tell you that it is equally or even stronger. Any guesses?
10? No.
Well, that's a great point, Dave. Yes. I mean, anytime there's distortion here, right? Like there's something for Kimberly to work out regarding self-love and to find self-love within herself and not to look for that, to be dependent on other people. Oh, I don't know if I'm lovable, you know, or I don't know if life is lovable if someone else doesn't love me. That's definitely something she has to contend with. That's absolutely true. But outside of the incarnation cross, there's another gate in her definition that is a very prominent feature of her not self. Which gate?
Are you relating it to the nodes at all? Are the nodes connected to this in any way? No?
They're not, no.
Can I buy a vowel?
All right, so here's the thing. This is the flow, right? You notice Jupiter and Neptune are absent from that flow, right? So she has color resonance, right, with her motivation. So when you have color resonance here, it's called skipping the moon, right? This doesn't get filtered by the moon. It jumps up here to the conceptual mind, right? So her mind is utterly preoccupied with making a contribution, right, to a group. Utterly preoccupied with making a contribution to a group because of this configuration. Remember, the lunar planetary square is not an arbitrary arrangement, right? Everything is situated in a particular way to, to illuminate the truth, right, of the person, right? And so she can be a real visionary in regard to making a contribution, right? And when I say visionary, what I mean is that this isn't getting filtered by the real world here. Let me just clear this off. This is skipping the real world. Doesn't matter what she sees, she has thoughts about how to make a contribution. Not necessarily grounded thoughts, right? If you want grounded thoughts, that's my design. I'm going to tell you what's actually happening. She doesn't know what the situation really calls for, right? But she knows what she thinks is a valuable contribution, right? And so you crack into these types of stories by understanding color resonance and how the square works. But this is as big of a not self theme for her as anything else in her chart.
It almost makes me think of when somebody talks about having a download or having direct access to some divine inspiration and how that's a double-edged sword. Some of that might be Jupiter or Neptune directly sending them something that bypasses the whole mechanism of filtering through what you actually see in the world and so on. And there can be a great gift there, but there can also be perhaps being ungrounded or not founded in reality. And it's also interesting to me that it's Jupiter and Neptune. Jupiter known for its grandiosity, and
Right.
Neptune known for veiling and delusion and illusion.
Right. So, this also makes Alaka visionary, right? Right. Very preoccupied with, this is defense, right? I know that one because that's my personality Earth, right? Guarding your energy, right? Defending against, having that energy being projected upon and asked to do something that he may not want to do, right? That's pretty interesting.
Well, he also has Neptune there, which you were saying is the other one that skips the moon. And so that would be kind of a double.
This is, yeah. So
But in fairness, he also has Pluto resonating, which doesn't skip the moon. So I guess we just have to take the whole picture into account that there are going to be these, what you're
well,
calling.
no, I'm saying Pluto. Right. Well, Pluto never skips the moon.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So
Right.
it's kind of like there is going to be some element of the direct connection of Neptune and Jupiter, but then there's also, I see the direct connection of Mercury and Pluto.
So this would be something that should be familiar, right? Because he's got this Neptune motivation connection, right? So anyhow,
Well, this is a really fascinating area. I've learned bits and pieces from you, and I've experimented a little bit, but I mean, this is just, it's so helpful looking at a reflector, looking at someone with all 9 centers defined, also even just looking at people of any level of definition, where, as you mentioned, there's a sort of secret collusion between gates that are part of their definition, part of their channels, and having a sort of skipping reality in connection to the mind and being a part of the potentially a part of the not self construct. I mean, that is just a really fascinating area of research.
here's an interesting. So notice that with this person, right, Neptune's veiling. So there's a question about Neptune. Neptune is veiling, right? Neptune is veiling this person's purpose, right? Because it's the same gate. And it's veiling the entire channel that it's in. Right. So she's not going to identify with being a transmitter. Right. And the question of purpose, which, anyone who has their personality sun in an undefined center is going to have questions of purpose. But also in this configuration, right, she can't get at it. She can't see her purpose. And this is an interesting one because this is censorship, right? Called Gate 26 the revisionist. It's going to revise the story of what really happened there. It's going to edit the memory. So there's all kinds of interesting implications here. Yeah, so Marissa, one second. So you have resonance. Yeah, I mean, it's another mental preoccupation, right? So you have to be really careful here. This is the philanthropist, if I remember correctly. Yeah, Jonah actually has this as well. So you're overly concerned with generosity and philanthropy and things of that nature, right? So you really want to get familiar with this at a line level, right? Either the motiveless nurturing of the disenfranchised to ensure harmony, right? Philosophic and humanitarian ideals, that can become a preoccupation for you. Or the withdrawing from direct contact, where giving is a form of defense, giving away ideas out of a sense of insecurity. So remember, Ra had gate 48 here, and he was preoccupied with trying to find his depth. And, he talked about it as a fool's errand. You don't have to go searching for Neptune. You don't have to try to make it happen, right? Best to just leave it alone, right? But idealism can get you in trouble, and philanthropy can get you in trouble to the extent that your mind signs you up for those activities.
I have one question, and also we're at about 5 minutes left. So if this is too much, we can save it for next time. But I noticed looking at Marissa's Jupiter placement, its 5th color, which does not resonate to the motivation, but does to the view, even though it skips the moon. So is that almost as if it didn't skip the moon in that sense?
That's a question I'm trying to sort out. Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I would say that my hunch would say she really can track the details, right? Like she really is tracking those because it is in resonance with her view. That's my hunch.
Yeah, it's something she sees, but it's not being filtered through the moon, so it may not have to do with her focus and drive, and yet
Right.
it is something that she is able to see out in the world through that view.
Exactly. Yep. And she agreed. Yep.
Well, I don't know if we have time for any more. Maybe we should just wrap up. This has been so wonderful. I'm so excited that this is now, at least for the time being, a weekly. And this is just these kind of glimpses we get into such layers of depth and detail are just so exciting to me, because it makes me want to revisit charts I've already looked at 100 times and look at them in a new lens. And that's always something good, to be able to kind of go back to something we've seen before with new eyes. I would love to keep going. It's simply the fact that for this week, we have Teresa and Mike scheduled on Maine in about 4 minutes. So I know that that won't always be the case. So we'll have a little more flexibility in going longer in the future if people are inclined. But I would just encourage everyone to get some really good questions and get your charts ready and to either submit in advance or just do it
Yeah.
live like we've been doing. And
Yeah, I mean, I would love if you submitted in advance. That's even better for me. But left mind, left view. I'm kind of seeing through my keyhole. I need some time to piece it all together. So, so yeah, send me your questions and your charts in advance.
yeah,
Thanks,
this is
James.
success. Thank you.
Yeah,
Way
thank
cool.
you. Bye
Thank you.
all.